all these zero tolerance policies in schools were failures. And yet somehow with behavior, we resort to punishment, which does nothing to change that child's behavior.
Rabbi Yaakov Sadigh is the head of Katz Hillel Day School of Boca Raton. He's on a mission to change the world, but the way he inspires that change is just as important as the change itself.
Like leaders, often we try to change people, and that's a mistake. But when you change culture, usually people gravitate towards that culture. They don't even know they're doing it.
Rabbi Sadigh's first big encounter with change was when he was just 9 years old, living peacefully in Iran when the Shah was overthrown.
I was 9 years old at the dinner table when my father told me we're leaving Iran tomorrow.
When he was 17 years old, he became a student of change at Ezra Academy in Queens, New York, where he was taught by one of the most life-changing teachers of our generation, Rabbi Moshe Weinberger.
He had a huge impact on me and when I went into education.
It was there that Rabbi Yaakov absorbed the powerful transformative speaking style.
I'm going to have to go back to Rav Weinberger. You know, the hook with the story, the vulnerability, the sincerity, the honesty. Just knowing him over the years, you just mimic the things that he does that are so successful.
Today, Rabbi Sadigh lectures around the world.
So within 1 month, I spoke at the OU for executives of synagogues. I spoke in LA for teachers, and I spoke at an event for principals.
He speaks on a variety of life-changing topics, like how to help people appreciate their jobs, how to create a culture that lasts even after its builders have moved on, and how to create not just great products and services for your customers, but to offer them magical experiences.
When we're done today, after our full day training, you're going to go back as the executive directors of your synagogues and figure out how to make shuls a better experience.
Of course, we talk about the fundamentals of transformative speaking, like how Rabbi Sadigh quickly creates connection with each new audience he speaks to.
You know, you read the room and you see the locked-in eyes and you see the smiles and you see the smirks. They're relating to you.
How to cut out the opening chit-chat of your presentation and grab an audience's attention immediately.
You know, you could have gone through the whole thanking, and it's a pleasure to be here. No, it's awful to be here. Of course, it's a pleasure to be here. So you don't have to say that again.
And how having one objective per presentation makes your message much stronger and more memorable.
But when you start giving more than one message, it's going to be very hard to gauge which one was it. Is that the one that you really wanted them to walk away with?
I learned so much from my interview with Rabbi Yaakov Sadigh, and I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Yaakov Sadigh. What I was intrigued by with your story, among other things, is Rabbi Moshe Weinberger is, I guess, probably the best place to start for me because he had such a profound influence. I started listening to his shiurim online on YU Torah, and they made such a huge impression upon me. And I know that you were a student of his growing up. I just want to hear a little bit about that and how he transformed your life.
Yeah, 100%. So I ended up at Ezra Academy of Queens, which is a very special place for children who need a second chance in Judaism. My background had been more public school, coming from Iran, and I was in his shiur for 4 years. And as you mentioned, it was the stories because, you know, all the research shows the power of a good story, the connection, how it resonates with people. And of course, then you have all those TED Talks and everything else that explains how the brain works and the different parts of the brain and what a story does, you know, to get us engaged and connect to the message that speaker is about to convey. So obviously, Rabbi Weinberger is a tremendous Talmid Chacham, and you know, he's beyond stories. But we talk about the stories, and I often talk about a plaque that sits right to the left of me here, and look at it every day. It says, "Everyone who remembers his own education remembers teachers, not methods, techniques. The teacher is the heart of the educational system." So, you know, I vividly remember him telling those stories, and I vividly remember what grade I was when I heard that story. You know, a lot of times his stuff goes viral, you know, and you know, when I get it, I smile. I said, "Yeah, I heard that in 10th grade," you know, which is remarkable. So he had a huge impact on me. And when I went into education and having to give lectures myself in classes, I mimicked so much of his style of beginning with a story, ending with a story, and really using those stories as a hook to get my message across. So till today, I pretty much remember almost all of them. I may
Yeah.
be missing some details here and there. I sometimes actually ask him, I said, Rebbe, I think if I could say this respectfully, you said that in the name of Rav Menachem Mendel Rimanov in high school. Now I saw you mentioned the Kalev Rebbe, so we can have that also.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they get mixed up over the years. Um, so what I'm curious about also is his uncanny ability to be vulnerable, to tell stories about himself that sometimes may not necessarily paint who he is right now in such a great light. Like maybe someone would think that they'd lose some chashivas for him if he talks about wearing a kippah sruga as a kid, or I don't know if you heard the story. The story that did it for me with him was he talked about when he had a girlfriend, and a mentor of his asked him about it, and I think he lied, and the person picked him up and threw him in the bushes. I don't know if you remember that story, but I mean,
Yeah.
these stories that are, when you look at him now and you try to match it with the story, that they don't really jive, and so, but yet he was willing to be forward and authentic and vulnerable about that, litoelis, for the purpose of helping people grow. And I'm curious about how that had an impact on you.
Oh my goodness. I mean, first of all, the fact that he would take his Bekisha off and play softball with us and basketball, and he would talk about his youth all the time. Even today, as recent as, his visit to Boca, his annual visit to Boca in January, where he quotes songs from, let's say, Elton John, or, you'd say Pasnish, what is a big Talmid Chacham doing, quoting those lyrics. But again, it's vulnerability, and I use that all the time. I talk to students here about not keeping kosher till I was 17 or 18, or not keeping Shabbat till I was 17 or 18. And they can't believe it. They go, but you're ahead of school. I go, I understand that. But that wasn't my upbringing. That wasn't my journey. And I think I am more committed to Judaism and Torah mitzvot more than ever, simply because of that I was on the other side, and I didn't grow up religious. So I definitely connect to a speaker when they make themselves vulnerable, or they make fun of themselves. I do it all the time, and I mean it. Like, there's a line that I use all the time. I say, the 700 kids I have here at Katz Day School, they're easy. It's the 5 I have at home. I know what to do. I know what to do with them, and I mean it. I can run a school, but thank God for my wife. With my own kids, I have no idea what to do. So I use that a lot, and I see you read the room, as you were saying before, and you see the locked in eyes, and you see the smiles, and you see the smirks. They're relating to you because you're saying you're not know-it-all. You're not an expert in education at home and raising kids because you run a school with 700 kids. You're just like me when you get home. You have trouble putting your kids to bed. You have trouble getting them to do their homework. You have trouble with them staying out too late. You have trouble with them not going to a certain party they shouldn't go to. So definitely that's a huge part of what makes a speaker connect with his audience.
Right. Relatable, I guess, is probably the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what would you say to someone who is struggling with the conflict of wanting to appear as a leader, yet at the same time showing that they're also either have struggled in the past or maybe currently struggling? How do you resolve that tension?
Look, I think when I see people are so scared to do it, I say start with one thing that's the least, vulnerable thing about you to share, and try it, whether you're in shul or Sheva Brachot, or you're somewhere out there. Say something about yourself, and you'll see, hey, I mean, nobody, like you said, oh my God, I don't believe this. Nobody walked out of the room or anything like that. And then start building on that. You
Mhm.
become more and more comfortable with it as you try, you try to share those things that you may have not in the past. And you get to a point that, hey, it's okay. It's okay to tell people, I get you. I came from there. I'm struggling with the same things.
Right. Dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm also very fascinated with your fascination with marketing and with customer service, and so if you could repeat the story, if you don't mind, for the people who haven't heard it yet, about how you were at Disneyland or Disney World or Disneyland.
I was in Disney World. Yeah.
Disney World, yeah, and
Yeah.
your customer experience
Yeah.
there led you on this journey.
Yeah. People say I'm obsessed or infatuated at this point. The story goes that I've said it so many times that we were in the Magic Kingdom and we're walking around and we're exhausted. It's towards the afternoon. We sat in a little corner by a lagoon over there with some water and benches. And I went to buy my kids the Mickey Premium ice cream bar, which I knew was kosher. And when I came and gave it out, a seagull came and snatched snatched it out of my daughter Ayelet's hand. And I say, I think they heard her scream in Epcot. And as I'm going back to the kiosk, I'm thinking I'm wearing a kippah. I'm embarrassed to say, like, what do I tell them? It's your seagull that took our ice cream. You got to give me another one. I just put my hand in my pocket. I said, I'm just going to buy another one. I'm not going to tell stories and make a fool out of myself. And the cast member, as the employees at Disney are referred to, handed me another ice cream. I said, sorry, I saw the whole story. It's crazy. He said, we're big believers in conservation here, and we have wildlife here, and it's part of our philosophy to allow for it. And your daughter has a wonderful story to tell when she goes home. I got back to the benches. I said, I got to figure this out. I got to figure out what is the secret to creating happiness. What is the secret to customer service that they do better than anybody else? It has nothing to do with, politically where they stand today or where they stood back then. Business. I just wanted to know their business model. And when I researched, I found that they're happy to share it with you for a lot of money. And it's called the Disney Institute. And their courses are, 4.5 day courses. And there's 4 or 5 of them, depending on the seasons that they run them. And I did all of them. And I just couldn't get enough of it because I was there with so many corporate people that they themselves are great. They themselves are great companies. And I couldn't understand why they're there. And I quickly found that is because they wanted to learn the secret as well, where in the last few decades, the world shifted from just being a
Product, right?
putting out a good product to being an experience, an experience economy. So everything is an experience today. Coffee, cars, anything you do, people don't want to just give you a good product, but also an amazing experience. So my hypothesis was, I like to bring this to the school system where I don't think the Torah needs bells or whistles. The Torah is the Torah, but I think kids are not having that great experience. I think at best schools are saying at their open houses, we have a great math department and we have fab labs and we have great Gemara teachers and you should, otherwise you're going to close down. But no one's talking about, when a child comes here from nursery to 12th grade or 8th grade, your child is just going to have the most wonderful experience. And what are you doing to create those experiences? Just the other day, you can't make this up. Make this stuff up. My EC director thought of an idea because it's a leap year. To have leap day, and she put these little frogs, about 500 of them, all over campus, and it was a mad hunt to find them, and the kids were supposed to give it to their teacher, their favorite teacher, and the one who has the most wins. And I was on a hunt. I'm the head of school. I'm looking on the benches, and I'm looking on top of mezuzahs, and I bought into it, and that's such a fabulous day. And we announced the winner, and the teacher who won was bribing kids by giving them chocolates. So that became a scandal, Like we created an experience to talk about, a leap year, in a sense. So it's those kind of things. Dressing up as an old lady on the 100th day of school. I dressed up as Noah on Parshat Noah on a horse, and I went around the campus gathering the animals and bringing it to the ark. You know,
Wow.
yeah, we've got to be careful because you don't want school to become camp, and we're careful not to do that. But we're creating great experiences. So the world
Yeah.
shifted from an industrial economy to an experience economy, and I wanted to see if schools can do that too. And it's been a hypothesis that I've been able to, with data, prove that it's doable. So.
Amazing. Yeah. My only regret is that my kids are not in your school.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to come back to school.
Yeah. There's still time. We just had a baby the past year, so
Mazel tov. Mazel tov.
maybe. So I have a couple of questions about that. The first one is which is the first school? Because I know you've been the head of a few schools, right? So was it Katz? Was it that the first one where you instituted this?
I started, where did I first institute this? I began this journey with Disney when I was at Hank, Hebrew Academy, Nassau County in West Hempstead. And as I kept going to the courses and coming back, I kind of sprinkled in more and more of what I was learning. And, for example, if we had a third grade wax museum, typically you dress up as Babe Ruth or whatever, the kids dressed up as, you'd have the backdrop and, they press your button and you talk about Babe Ruth. But when I came back on that trip, that was when I learned that Disney works with figuring out how to tap into your senses and smell, as I didn't know others did. I didn't know that smell triggers the memory more than any other, of the senses. And when we walked into, I think it was MGM Studios that they asked us to count how many popcorn vendors were at the front gate, and there was three of them, and they said we just had so much to eat at breakfast. Who's having popcorn at 9 in the morning? And they said nobody, and they don't care. They're generating the smell of popcorn. So when you come in, they trigger your memories from being a child and being at a carnival and being at the circus, and you're already in a good mood when you come in. So we added that to the wax museum, and parents were saying this was the best wax museum ever. I don't know what it was about this year, and the teacher brought in a tent and she made it like a circus in there. And it was the same wax museum. It was kids just, kind of researching somebody in history that they wanted to learn about and tell you about, but we made it into an experience. Yeah.
Did did it did it get full adoption right away, or did you have trouble integrating it into the culture of the school with some of the existing teachers?
Yeah, nothing I want to implement ever gets, and that's a sign that it's going to work. Because if
Yeah.
they open up their arms, something's wrong. There were some teachers who were apprehensive, and they said, they would use this line with me. They would say, with all due respect, Rabbi Sadigh, this is school. This is not Disney. You're going to make this into, like a camp, and you're going to water things down. And I wasn't about to water anything down. We were ramping things up, learning better, more experiential learning is, today we're learning that that's how kids learn best, if anything. So I think what happens is, Daniel, I think that, people make a mistake. Leaders often think, we try to change people, and that's a mistake because people put their guards up and they don't want you to change them. It's for you to change me. I think we need to focus on changing cultures, and that leaves people in a place where they have to make a decision. Do I gravitate towards this new culture, or do I say it's not for me? I've had teachers come in, close the door, and say, Rabbi, I see where you're headed. I see what you're trying to do. This is just not for me. And I say, I have the utmost respect for you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That took a lot for you to do that. But when you change culture, usually people gravitate towards that culture. They don't even know they're doing it. Because you're not trying to change them, you're changing the culture. So I really focused on changing the culture, not changing the people. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So another thing that I found very intriguing was that, besides there's the movement away from the product and just the quality of the product and even the experience, but there's you seem to be laser focused on the idea that the teachers and the staff really need to convey that they care about the students, and that if they don't care, there's the famous quote that people don't care what you know until you know that they care. So you could have great product, you could have even great experience, but unless you have that third component, that students really feel that you have their best interest in heart, then it's not going to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. One of my favorite books is the Netivot Shalom of Shalom Brzezowski, who has amazing work on Chumash and Parsha and Machshava and things like that. Wrote a book for Mechanchim, and it's called Netivei Chinuch. And he says in there that a child is given a gift from God. They have an antenna on their head, and they can sense from miles away if a teacher sincerely cares and loves them. Or you could give out prizes and show teeth all day and smile, but if that kid senses you're annoyed by him and you're upset that they're in your class, we used to do this, and I'm guilty of this myself. The minute I got my class list, I would run up and down and see, oh, I heard so much about this kid. It's going to be a rough year. How awful. So if the kid senses that you don't want him or her in that class, that you don't stand a chance. But if that child knows, even you're tough on them, but it's tough love, that kid will be open to anything, So you're right, the basis of it is first for that child to feel that you unconditionally love that child and want to see that child succeed.
Yeah. And me, that almost seems like a harder thing to introduce into a culture where teachers may view their job as kind of just more pragmatic to impart information. To change that culture, would you say that is hard, or just as hard, or maybe even harder?
Very difficult. Look, Daniel, there's a reason why there's a national teacher crisis and shortage. The go-to answer is we don't pay them enough and the benefits aren't great. Those were answers we gave when Adam Rishon came into the world. I think since then, it's way beyond. Their jobs have become impossible. If you're an OT, PT, speech therapist, you go home at 4, you've put in a days of work. I'm not, those people are heroes to me. I'm not, God forbid, comparing and saying that they're not working hard. But after 4 o'clock, you're done. You're not getting any more emails. No one's calling to scream at you. You're not getting a scathing email 11 o'clock before you go to sleep that won't let you sleep all night. And you're getting thank yous. My child knows how to hold a pencil correctly and all the work that you've done. Again, they have their struggles as well. I'm not taking away from that. But the job of a teacher became teaching, coaching, mentoring, being a psychologist. You get home at 4 or 5 o'clock, you're making up tests, 3 versions of a test, talking to the kids' therapists and parents and emails and the behavioral issues in school. And it's become an impossible job. So my line every year is when I come in, well, here we start early in August. I stand in front of the teachers and they know because they already know that I'm going to say it. And I say, thank God you came back, because I went into the summer not knowing, if you guys were going to come back, so it's incredible that they still want to do this. So we have to support them and impress upon them that all the things they want to accomplish, they will once they make that connection with the child first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious also about how, as a speaker, how would you take that customer-centric approach and apply that, and the coach mentor approach to apply that to giving a presentation? I know you do a lot of speaking. Are those things that are kind of working in the back of your mind while you're doing it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, similar to what you and I were talking about in the beginning of your background in comedy and how you've applied it to the rabbinate. It's got to be engaging and entertaining, not because you're getting paid and you're the rabbi and it's your job to give the drasha, but what can you do to get this message over where it's going to resonate with them and they're going to walk away with something and try to do something better tomorrow and be a better person, or give them something to think about. So we spoke about the stories. We spoke about, connecting with them. The congruency is so important, something that I learned as the years went on when I, was trying to become a better teacher. I found myself doing a lot of things, teaching Gemara, telling a story from the Baal Shem Tov, bringing a medrash in, talking about the Yankees, and I thought, wow, boy, I gave him a full hour of stuff. And they heard a lot of things from me, but I'm not sure what they walked out with. It probably the Yankees. So, when I learned how to put together a well-designed lesson, which means with a clear objective, here's what I want the kids to know before they leave, and they have to demonstrate it to me that they know it. They're going to write it, match it, say it to each other, learn b'chavruta. Somehow I'm going to assess them that they got, the objective. And then I learned that whatever I'm going to use in that lesson has to be congruent with my objective. So you could tell a Baal Shem Tov story, and you should, but is that congruent with what you're trying to get across? You want to bring in a Gadata from the Gemara, wonderful. Is that congruent with what you're trying to get across? When I started lining them up throughout my speech, everything was connecting and everything was just banging out the message again. And it was a hammer banging it and banging it and banging it. One message to say, many different sources and ways of getting it across. So when you make it entertaining, they look at their watch and like, wow, he's been talking for a half hour. It's like 5 minutes, as opposed to what would really shut me down sometimes. And God forbid, I'm not taking a shot at Rabbanim that do this. This is what you do. You come to the bima, or to the shtender, and you say in this week's parsha. But if it was just in this week's parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Paro, and I gauge the room and I read the room, and like they're taking out pamphlets, they're opening up their chumashim, they're taking things they printed before Shabbat that they want to read. So that hook wasn't there. And you possibly have lost them right off the bat by saying, it says in this week's Parsha, which is nothing wrong. What are you supposed to say? You're paid to talk about this week's Parsha. But, in my new job that I'm going to be taking next year, because I'm moving back to the tri-state area to be with family. So they had a welcome day for me at Hillel in New Jersey. So, you could have gone through the whole thanking all the people who said wonderful things about you and introduced you, and it's a pleasure to be here. No, it's awful to be here. Of course, it's a pleasure to be here. So you don't have to say that again. I began by saying I was 9 years old at the dinner table when my father told me we're leaving Iran tomorrow. And I looked around and I had the entire. I did all the thank yous afterwards and all the acknowledgments. I got it all in. I got up there and I said, I was 9 years old. I had just finished dinner when my father said, we're leaving tomorrow. That was it. So,
Yeah, that is very compelling. So I want to revisit just for a moment. You said one message. So I know there's a lot of thought, schools of thought rather, between how many messages to give in a presentation. In your mind, it's one.
yeah, I think one, it could have tolodot, it could have subcompartments, of that message. But when you start giving more than one message, it's going to be very hard to gauge what they're walking away with. Which one was it? Is that the one that you really wanted them to walk away with? I mean, I tell teachers, if you get one clear objective across in every lesson, and our middle school students have 8 classes a day, 8 or 9 classes a day, they're walking away with 9 clear lessons a day, multiplied by 172 school days. That's unbelievable. So don't fall for that. Stick to that one message and make sure that everything else is congruent with that message, and figure out a way to assess them where they can demonstrate to you that they got it. And you're an awesome teacher.
Yeah. So you approach your presentations, when you give presentations, you would approach it the same way you tell the teachers to give a lesson, which is come in with a clear defined objective, one single objective, all sorts of supporting materials for that objective, but anything that's further the objective you want to jettison. So not.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So within 1 month, I spoke at the OU for executives of synagogues. I spoke in LA for teachers, and I spoke at an event for principles. So those are three different messages. For the teachers, my objective in Los Angeles was, when we're done today, after our full day training, you're going to be able to go into your classroom tomorrow and figure out how to create some great experiences for your students. For the OU, it was, you're going to go back as the executive directors of your synagogues and figure out how to make shuls a better experience. And for the administrators was, how can you engage your teachers to consider them like, Disney cast members, where everyone from the bus driver to the ancillary staff to the secretaries and everyone in that building feels that they have the greatest job in the world. I was fascinated by the people who are custodial, the custodial engineers at Disney. They think they have a great job. They're picking up garbage, but they do pin trading and they help you with directions, and they do water art, which is they put a rubber band around the broom and dip it into water and make Goofy and Minnie. Like, you took someone who anywhere else would tell their friends at the dinner table, I collect garbage for a living. No, I work for Disney and I create memories. I create great experiences. Now, will that person do that for 10, 15 years? I doubt it. They're going to move up the ladder and do different things. But while they're doing that, they think they have the greatest job in the world. So the messaging in each of those sessions was very different. And I had that objective clear every time I started at the beginning of the day.
Yeah. So how do you decide on an objective? How do you let's say you're speaking to the OU. How do you decide what's the most important thing? Assuming that they didn't ask you to speak on a specific topic, how do you decide what is the most important thing for them to hear? And the same thing with in a classroom. How do you decide how does the teacher decide what the objective is? What do the kids need to hear?
These are executive directors that are getting phone calls about their shul dues and, kiddish issues. And, I took the whole first for my son's bar mitzvah, what's going on? Like, these aren't glorified positions of so I wanted to kind of give them that sense and that feeling that they do have a great job. They play an integral role to make sure that the rabbi is doing great, because the rabbi can't do it without the executive director, and how they are a big part of that success of that shul being a place that people like to pray and go to and bring their kids for play groups, and the details matter. That's one thing that Disney's huge on, the details. The story goes is that, if you've been to Disney World, and the Enchanted House, at Walt Disney World, it is, you sit there and the birds. Have you been? The birds do a whole
Disney World, Disneyland.
Okay, so I don't know if it's at Disney. I don't remember. So Walt went down to South America and studied birds, and he painted them, and he studied everything about the birds. And they did a dry run where it's actually cute. There's a whole story where all the birds are talking to each other, and that's the whole production. And he said in the dry, he says, "Nah, it's not good enough." They go, "Well, we don't know what else to do. We went down to South America with you. Unless you get some birds to talk and become humans, we don't know what else to do. What is the problem?" He said, "I noticed that when they're talking, their chests are not sinking. They're not breathing. It doesn't look real enough. Go back to the drawing table and figure out how to make their chests sink and they put some hydraulic kind of mechanism in there that when the birds are talking, their chests are sinking in." So that was the day we learned about details. When there's a chumash or siddur presentation, I come here the night before. It's not an obsession. I just want to make sure, are the aisles wide enough? Are there enough seats? Were the balloons delivered? Are the mic systems working? I don't go into any assembly without two microphones in my pocket, because I was at a very popular fancy bar mitzvah where it was time for the speeches. The batteries ran out and they couldn't find two batteries. And it was just like, it became a circus. We had to project our voice. And so I said, two batteries. They couldn't find two batteries for the microphone. Again, you're going to call me obsessive. You're going to call, come on, Rabbi. Okay, it might happen once in a while. The batteries may run out. I get it. But if it's a big thing happening, I'll put two batteries in my pocket. Yeah. So that's so the details. So the executive directors are a big part of that, of all those little things that people don't see in shul. And I can't tell you how many emails I got afterwards to say I was feeling pretty bad about myself. Like, what am I doing this job? It's a thankless job. All I get is complaints all day. And you gave me a different perspective. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was your objective, was to boost their morale, let's say. And how did you decide on that objective? I mean, you could have come up with maybe multiple types of objectives. How do you decide on that one? How does a teacher decide which objective to teach out of a lesson?
Look, a teacher is following a curriculum, so it's a little bit different. You're going to have to teach what you need to teach to get this child into third, fourth, fifth grade, into Hatchalat Gemara, and whatever comes up next. So based on what you need to teach that day, you're going to be clear that I'm going to teach these three psukim to get to this Rashi. And my objective is for them to know why Rashi was bothered by a word or a sentence or a repetition in these three psukim. And that's a great skill, because in third grade, you're beginning to teach children to read Rashi and to understand Rashi's purpose for his perush on Chumash. So it's pretty much laid out for you. With the executive directors, again, it was a sense that I had just seeing them in my own shuls and my own, that always feel so great about themselves. They're in some back office somewhere. Their name is on the stationery and they get complaints all day. And I wanted to genuinely tell them that they play a big role and that they are a big part of the shul. So each situation, and then a lot of times people will tell me, like, in the LA visit, the head of school told me that we want to boost our culture amongst teachers. We want to boost, we want what we've heard you do to create educational experiences. So that was like given to me. So
yeah. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you're transitioning at the end of the year. So how do you ensure that what you've created doesn't leave with you, that you maintain the culture, that you create a sense of permanence of the culture even without you being the driving force behind it?
Such a great question. The easiest thing to do is to revert back to what you were doing, which didn't need work and hard work. So, I always begin by training the upper staff and get them to authentically, sincerely buy into what we're doing. So if you've trained your upper staff, to go along with your vision of what you thought is right for the school, you hope that that's going to continue. We have an amazing tier 2 people here at the school. I gauge it from when I left Hank, because, a lot of the wonderful things we worked on are still there. A lot of times that could be tricky because, once the head of school leaves, other people might leave, might not leave. There could be a change in personnel, and then it becomes very difficult. And that's heartbreaking because you worked hard to do something and it's not there. But I'm fairly confident that it'll continue here because it's working. And, just today I was talking to my assistant that we're up to renewing what we do every year. We bring a company that washes every staff member's car for Pesach. Because if we can take that off your plate and you don't have to worry about your car being clean before Pesach, then that's something great we can do for you. She came to remind me, it wasn't me going to her and saying, hey, Jill, where are we holding with the company that cleans the cars for Pesach? It's already in her head. She's already there.
Oh, that's great.
So she's going to do that next year also, regardless of whether I'm here or I'm not here. So,
Are these mostly your ideas, or are staff members generating ideas? Do you encourage them to generate experiences?
my job is to inspire them. The ideas come from them. This was Jill's idea to do the car wash. My first year here, after being inspired by things I wanted to do, she created a committee. She put a teacher on it, a couple secretaries on it, a parent, PTA representative, and she had, Ruach, kind of a Ruach committee. And it comes from them. I think the greatest job of a leader is to motivate and to inspire the people around him.
Yeah.
Let the ideas flow. I'll poke them here and there, and I'll kind of like sprinkle some stuff, but they're running away with it. It's their ideas.
So tell me a little bit about how you learned how to speak publicly. It sounds like you have a keen eye for engagement. Like we were talking, you don't want to bore people right out of the starting gate. You want to kind of just grab them right away. Where did you learn these techniques? Who did you study? Maybe some of your influences.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back to Rav Weinberger because I could sit and listen to him for 3 hours. All the things we spoke about, the hook with the story, the vulnerability, the sincerity, the honesty, the congruency of everything he spoke about came to that one point he wanted to make. I said, I can sit through this for 3 hours. And just knowing him over the years, you just mimic the things that he does that are so successful. When he comes down here to Florida, people are like upset that he stops talking. And sometimes in a drasha, you want to just like go like, all right, come on, when is this over? Every time I think he's ending, he's but one more thing, but I'm gonna have to give him the credit for it.
Yeah, I like I said, I had listened to him for a couple of years on YU Torah before I ever had a chance to hear him speak. I tried so many times, and every time I would make it to New York, he'd be away. And this past summer, he was in Cleveland, and I drove, close to 3 hours each way to hear him speak,
Wow.
for 45 minutes or an hour or something. And it's an experience like you're describing. First there's a komzitz. That he doesn't just get up and speak. There's a komzitz, and then there's candles lit at the table where he sits, and that creates that intimacy. And it is, he speaks with his eyes closed a lot of the time, and you feel like you're in a very, very intimate type of environment that I never received any of that from listening to him on recorded shiurim. I never would have gotten that.
So Daniel, you drove 3 hours to have not just a talk, but an experience.
Yeah.
It's right there. Right there.
And again, there's that component that you feel that he really cares about everybody in the room. It's not just the experience, but it's the experience plus that, which makes it invaluable. I mean, priceless. That rare commodity, I think.
And everything that he says is sincere, and he means it, and he's lived it. He's been so honest with me about certain things that I brought up. He goes, I thought that when you were my student, but years later, I think differently. It takes a real big person to say that. He says, over the years, Yaakov, I see it differently today. So again, a person who's vulnerable and honest and not scared to say that I thought that differently back then, and now this is how I think.
Yeah, amazing. So tell me a little bit about the way that you structure a presentation in order to, we talked about the opening, but where do you fit in the message? How do you decide how to support the message with either stories or statistics or facts or things like that, and closing? How do you pull it all together? Do you have a method for that? Or
Sure. So I start with the stories and a lot of hooks and vulnerability. And then when I think they're ready to hear from me, I support it with a lot of data. We say, Chochma begoyim ta'amin, the outside world has what to teach us. So, there's so many studies that show that it takes one teacher to change a child's life. Real hardcore studies. Harvard has a famous one. So I talk about those. And then I'm very big on bringing sources from the Torah, because especially if I'm speaking to maybe, for lack of a better term, a more right-wing kind of school, they're going to be a little bit skeptical. Um, they're having a competition next door. If you hear the children, that's what makes it a school. That's the collaborative work they're doing in the lab next door. The more, let's say, Haredi type of schools, I'll bring a lot of sources from the Torah where it supports me to say that teaching a child requires relationships, or punishment is not the way to go. It's teaching a child how to behave. And it really solidifies my message, because I have the data and the support from the universities, and I have the data and support from the Torah. And it again goes back to the congruency. It all comes back together, where he's not just, he doesn't have just a hypothesis or some dream that he woke up with in the morning. He researched it. It's real. This is best practice. So a lot of data, a lot of real cases to support why I believe we teach children how to behave and we don't punish them. Midrashim, Gemaras, whatever it is. Or if I'm working on the culture in the Disney, just to talk about my experiences at Disney are not enough. Those teachers want real hardcore examples of, okay, that's nice. You inspired us, but I go back into my classroom tomorrow. How can I make my classroom into Disney? So I have all those practical examples and data where when teachers did this, the wax museum was an amazing wax museum, or when you do the frog, thing, or, so I have a lot of data to support that. So I build it with the hook, the stories, why I'm here, what do I want to share with you, and I support it with a lot of data. And at the end, when I sum it up, I want to make sure that I read the room, that they can walk away with something real tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Do you give them something to put into action? Do you try to give them let's say, a call to action, even in a small one, or is it just more of an attitude that you're trying to instill in them?
Yeah, it's the attitude. And I say, try to do one thing differently this week. Take one thing that you're doing that you normally would have done the same way, and it's fine. This is how we do it. This is how the report is done. This is how, somebody called me and asked me advice for what can they do to make their Yom HaAtzmaut, especially with what's going on in Israel, more meaningful this year. So I said, back at Hank, we had very talented people that made an entire museum out of, we made these cutouts of all the prime ministers, and through technology, just like at the museums, you would press on the iPad and put headsets on, and you'd, get an important fact about that particular prime minister, or like, wow, we didn't think of that, have a humongous map of Israel, printed on vinyl, and let the kids walk the map of Israel, because you'd be surprised how many kids have no idea where cities are, or where Jordan is, or where, so these are just not big ideas, but again, it's about the experience of how can we make Yom Ha'atzmaut more meaningful. So I try to give them at least something concrete that they're going to do differently.
Yeah. I want to revisit something you said a few moments ago, which is when I read the room and I feel that people are ready to hear from me, which is an amazing thing. I don't think people actually, maybe people gloss over what that means, but I think in the entertainment world, for a comedian, for example, it's called establishing the audience, where you get the buy-in from them, and instead of just launching into your content, you connect first. And I think that's something that, to me, it's something rare. I think it's very rare in speakers that first you are connecting with the crowd in front of you and getting their permission to teach them. Just because you were hired, just because you've been asked to speak, doesn't necessarily mean that the people seated in front of you actually are ready to hear from you.
Right.
I'm curious, how do you? Is it a hush? Is it a certain sense that you have that you have the people ready to hear your message now?
Yeah. Are you a fan of Adam Grant? I don't know if you read his books. He's he's phenomenal, give and take, and recently Hidden Potential. He's just an amazing, um, you know, um, industrial psychologist. And so he has a story that when he was invited to speak to the army, he says, I look young to begin with. Like, you look at, he has a baby face, and he's sitting in front of these generals, and they don't even know why they're there. Who is this kid? Why am I here? And why am I listening to this guy? So he thought to himself, I'm finished. I'm finished. So, he read the room very quickly, and, he started really making himself humble, and picked up on, I got to make it that I'm not here to teach you guys something. I don't know anything about strategy. I'm not a field marshal. I came here to share an experience with you and give you something to think about. You could Google it. It's one of his famous TED Talks, how he took that scary moment of being destroyed by these great, army personnel. And by the end of the talk, they were lining up to speak with him and ask him questions. This same baby-faced kid that, they didn't know why they were there for. He took a moment, he sized up the room, and he said, I got to make it clear to them that I'm not here to preach to them. I'm not here to teach them anything new. I'm here from a psychological advantage that I have, because that's what I study, to give them something to walk away with. So I always try to do that.
In what way? I'm just curious, because I think it's a very practical application that people can take away. How do you break down that us versus, or me versus them? They're there. Almost when you get up to speak, you can almost feel palpably when people almost like have their arms crossed. Like, okay, what's this guy? What does this guy have to? What's he taking up my time for? Is this going to be worth it? How do you overcome that hurdle? Using that approach that I'm not here necessarily to teach to you, or to give you something. You don't need something from me per se, but I'm here to share something that maybe you might find valuable.
Right. So one of the tricks I learned was, if I have a problem that I could share with them that I had, and what did I do to solve it? There's been brain studies that show that everyone's going to be thinking about, you did it that way, I would have done it this way. I'm wondering why you didn't do it the other way. Interesting that you chose to do that. So that's why I'm there to tell them about a struggle that I went through, a problem that I have, a problem that exists in society. This is what I did. This is what I'm doing to try to combat it. And then it gets everybody to try to think, say, well, what would I do if I was him? What would I do if my father told me on a Tuesday night at dinner table that we're leaving? Like, I'm leaving the United States, and we're going to Spain, we're going to Italy. Holy cow. Like, I don't know Italian. I can't speak Spanish. You hear what I'm saying? So
That's brilliant. Yeah.
That gets everybody in the room to say, whoa, wow. Like,
Yeah, it's almost like when you're trying to sell somebody on something, as opposed to pushing and being assertive and trying to impose your product on them, allowing them to poke and prod and decide, I'm curious about this, tell me a little bit more about this, and kind of almost falling back a little bit.
Yeah, I spoke at in one of the cities where it was a really right-wing school, and that was my workshops on teaching children how to behave and not punishing. And one of the teachers came and said, Rabbi, great presentation, ain't gonna work for me. In our school, it's law and order. They have to know the Rebbe's the Rebbe, you're the Talmid, and that's how it's gonna go. So I enjoyed it. It was entertaining, but it ain't gonna work. I got a call from him 6 months later. He said, I need your help. It was very big of him. And because I gave him all, I said, I totally get it. I told you, if it's not going to work in your school, then you got to work with your head of school, with your menahel, and with I totally get it. And I meant it. I didn't take it personally that he said, I've tried suspending them. I've tried calling in their parents. I take away incentives, and they don't care. They're not afraid of me, and they're not, I'm ready to listen, so, those are the success stories where,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
wasn't ready on that day, but he was ready six months later. So,
right, right. So maybe let's just take the last couple minutes to talk about your approach to discipline and punishment, because I think that's really important, and especially for rabbis, who have messages to impart. There's always the positive uplifting, but there's also, rabbis sometimes tend to give musar to they have to be able to uh, kind of mold their congregation in times when they're going off, in certain areas. So let's say, for example, a rabbi has to give a message that minyan, the attendance is slacking. So some people might have an approach where, we have to really kind of, what's a shul without a minyan? If we don't have a minyan, who are we?
right.
Whereas there might be another approach, and I'm curious, how would you approach such a scenario if you were
Yeah, before we get to the rabbinate scenario, because
yeah,
that's a very hard one. You know, let's start from the Torah. One of my favorite midrashim of all times is in that moment with Moshe Rabbeinu has that. This is it. He's handing over the baton to Yoshua. He has one message to give him. You would think he'd say, Yoshua, listen up, listen to me, and listen carefully. You can't turn your backs on these people for a second. They've been stabbing me for 40 years when all I wanted to do was save them. I could have sat in Pharaoh's palace and had a great life. I sacrificed my life for them, and all they've done is curse me out and try to stab me. You be tough on them, hold that stick right over them. And he says just the opposite. Am sha'ani moser, the people that I'm giving over to you, tinokotem, their babies, gedoyim him, their young goats. Al takbir aleihim. Don't be tough with them. Don't be tough with them. It's mind-boggling because he understood that 210 years of slavery really did a number on them. And as difficult as things were for Moshe Rabbeinu, he knew that the tough approach wasn't going to work. So then comes the studies where all these zero tolerance policies in schools were failures. Because as John Herner would say, when a child can't read, we teach him how to read. When a child can't do math, we teach him how to computate. When a child can't swim, we teach him how to swim. Somehow, and for some reason, when a child can't behave, we punish them. We don't punish someone that they're ninth grade and they can't read. We try phonics, we try whole language, we try phonemic awareness. We do whatever we can to get this kid to read. We don't say, you're going to go to a supermarket and every time you're just going to have to ask the people there to pick out the cereal for you. You're not going to be able to read. We tried it. It ain't going to work for you. We don't do that. And yet somehow with behavior, we resort to punishment, which does nothing to change that child's behavior. And research shows, and anyone can look this up. At best, it suppresses them to temporarily refrain from doing that thing again, not teaching them how to do it better or differently. So in the shul setting, I do much better if the Rav of the shul comes and says, Rabbi Yaakov, I see that the corner table is a little bit levidik, Can I count on you to be mechazik we're trying to work on the talking in shul. Can I count on you too? As opposed to, there's a third week in a row that I got to talk to you guys about that table, or, the Kiddush club, my goodness, the Rabbonim, again, I'm not a rabbi, Chalila, I'm not qualified to say the Kiddush clubs are a problem, and I'm a head of school. I don't know how to tackle them, but I know that the more they try to go after the Kiddush clubs, the more underground Kiddush clubs, pop up. So do I have the answer?
Tzvardeya, hitting the Tzvardeya keeps on multiplying. Yeah.
I don't have the answer. If I had to be a shul rabbi, I'd have to figure it out. But I just know that I respond well when the Rabbanim come to me and try to get me on board sincerely. What can we do to strengthen no talking in shul? What can we do to make sure people don't take off their talit until after, Adon Olam, or whatever those things are, as opposed to, giving musar and berating the congregation, which people are just gonna, and again, you see, I'm so research driven and data driven. Research shows that when you speak to a group of people together about something that they did wrong, it bands them and makes them even stronger. Research says you should divide and conquer and talk to individuals. If you give musar to a whole audience, they feel it's you against them, and they even become stronger. And, so we do that in school a lot. We try to divide and conquer. There are times that I give general speeches, of course, about chesed and being kind, obviously. But if there's a core issue that's going on in the school, we're successful by dividing and conquering.
Mm-hmm. Okay, amazing. Very, very helpful. So good. So many practical applications. I'm so glad that you made the time for me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now.